Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out a pair of prototypes from the micro brand Selten. This is their upcoming M1 Moonphase. This is launching on Kickstarter on September 24th of 2024, and I'll of course have a link down the video description. In case you missed it, did already feature an unboxing of this pair, however do note, the packaging is still being finalized, so we'll cover everything you need to see in this one. As far as administrative matters, if you saw that banner, while these are prototypes, they do intend to send me a production version, and I always of course want to be upfront about that. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and take these one at a time. We'll first knock out the specs and really get a feel for what these are like to live with. As far as the case size, measured from the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, this is coming in at 38.5 millimeters. The bezel, interestingly, does actually kick out slightly, so it's coming in at 38.7 millimeters, and we'll explore that further. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a nice wrist versatile 45.5 millimeters. The total thickness on my calipers is a little bit thicker than their stated spec, but it's still coming in very slim at 11.7 millimeters, and that is inclusive of the crystal that we'll check out momentarily. The stated specs without the crystal is 10.7 millimeters. As far as the crystal itself, this is a very subtly domed crystal. As you can see, it almost looks flat, however, if you set it down on a desk, it does have a slight curvature to it. This is a double dome sapphire, and it does feature an inner air coating, which I found to be more than adequate with these. They actually let in just the right amount of light without having too much glare, so that's excellent. As far as the movement, these are beating away with a Miyota 9015. For those who are not familiar, it's your typical Miyota 9 series, which is to say it's an excellent movement overall. It is going to be automatic, hacking, hand winding, higher beat of 28,800 beats per hour, around a 40-hour power reserve, and then this particular one does actually have can't get rid of that cat here, this particular one does have a custom Moonphase module for it as well. And one of the things that's very cool with this is, as we saw in the unboxing, this actually can be adjusted in either direction, so depending on how you spin the crown, it can move in either direction. However, this has been customized so that it actually, when the time changes at midnight, this actually rotates around clockwise, which is different than many of the other ones we've seen. If you saw the Loresome video, that Miyota movement did go counterclockwise because that's the direction of the date. However, they did a different route here. As far as the water resistance, this is coming standard with 50 meters or 5 atmospheres of water resistance. Unfortunately, that's not the highest in the world. I usually like to see 100 meters water resistance, but given the style for this, I think it's plenty acceptable and we'll give them a pass. As far as the weight, on the strap here, this is coming in at 67.1 grams, very light overall. And on the bracelet, it's not altogether that much heavier. It's coming in at 119.9 grams, so just under double the weight. However, that's still a very light weight overall, and this is definitely one that doesn't wear you down. I do think that it wears its weight a little bit heavy, however, I find it wears well and is pretty well balanced overall. So now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and dive deeper. First, we'll check out the colors. This is available in 5 different variants. There's the 2 we're looking at today, which is the Musu, or however you pronounce that, black, which is a little bit less black than Vanta black. However, it's still a very black dial, as we'll check out. There's also an Aventurine, and we'll look at a comp. There's a Meteorite, we'll look at another comp for that as well. And then there's 2 different versions of the CNC Guilloche Mother of Pearl. We're looking at specifically the white one, but there's also a black variant. As far as the dials themselves, one of the things that you're going to notice is these do have a primarily sterile dial. However, they're far from boring. They have a lot going on based on the dial selections, and then of course on the CNC Guilloche version with that patterning as well. With the Musu black version, you're going to notice that has a deep, rich blackness. It truly gives you that black hole effect. If you have not experienced one in person, which this was my first opportunity, it really is a cool effect. Yes, it's just a black dial. However, it's a very black dial, and that really does change up the look in the way that I feel it presents itself as far as the overall character. Has a lot more character to it than most black dials do, including glossy ones, and that's pretty cool. As far as the Mother of Pearl, that, as I already mentioned, is a CNC Guilloche Mother of Pearl. That's actually something that I've never seen before. CNC Guilloche in and of itself, we actually checked it out recently on a Zelos Nova 2. However, this on a Mother of Pearl, it is such an intricate pattern, and it is such a cool effect. Not only do you get the pearlescence that is the, obviously, character of a pearl, hence pearlescence, where you get a lot of color shift, a lot of light play. It gives you that kind of like Aurora Borealis kind of effect there. Just really cool look. But additionally, though, with this guilloche, no matter how you're looking at this, no matter how the light is hitting it, whether you see just a white dial, it's attractive, or you see that guilloche pattern, which is present most of the time, though it's relatively subtle, It is just such an attractive dial to look at. But what's really cool though is when you get that pearlescence in just the right lighting conditions, and with mother of pearl, it does have to hit it right. But with that, when you get that aurora pop, it's so neat with this guilloche pattern because not only do you see the pattern, but it actually reflects that light differently because of it. So you get that aurora and it actually kind of ripples through and it actually can transition from kind of the peaks and the valleys there in that guilloche pattern. Just such a cool effect. Really, really like that a lot. As far as the dial layouts for these, all of them, with the exception of the Mosu Black, are going to have a chaptering. So the Mosu Black, they wanted to go for that true stealthed out effect, so that one does not have a chaptering. As far as the other variants though, with having the chaptering, you're going to notice that these have pronounced dots at your 5-minute increments, and then you have your individual marks in between as well, so you do retain precision legibility. As far as the finishing on that chaptering, it is going to be somewhat of like a circular brush, looks like a stainless steel kind of look to that, and that's a cool effect, and I think sets off nicely on at least this mother of pearl dial, though I think it looks good on all the variants that I've seen pictures of. As far as the branding, you can see that they only did branding at the 6 o'clock position, and that is printed directly on the chaptering, so again, keeping that sterile dial effect. One of the claims to fame with this particular watch is the Moonphase implementation. This is actually, they believe, the first watch that has ever featured a tantalum Moonphase. So that disc, you heard me correct, is tantalum. For those who aren't familiar, that is an exotic material, very rare for it. You don't see it much in watches in general, or in general for that matter. Really cool effect there, but we'll talk about that further as we go throughout. As far as the hardware, this really only has a pretty simplistic setup. You don't have any indexes or markers with the exception of the chapter ring with your hashes. As far as the handset itself, you only have an hour and a minute hand, so of course no second hand as you can see here. The styling of this is what I would call somewhere between like a spear or a lance type handset. It is a full polish, and it does feature very nice facets, which give great light play, but also they're very cleanly done. The polishing, it has a large flat area for it. The polishing seems to be really excellent, especially being on a prototype, but those facets really pick up the light nicely and just give a more premium aesthetic and feel to this, so I really appreciate that. As far as the pinion, you can see that this does have a nice pinion cap applied to it, and it actually has an interesting kind of like bowl spacer that's down there. I don't know if that was to adjust for the pinion stack for not having a second hand, or if that was just an aesthetic choice, but that looks cool. And then as you can see, and I'm sure have already deduced, this one does not have a lume for it. So this is going to be just a daytime watch, which again, I think is fine with the style of it. As far as the bezel on this, as we already saw, is a fixed construction. Additionally, you might not have readily picked up on, not only does it protrude slightly from the case, which gives a cool aesthetic effect that we'll check out further, but additionally though, it is a concave shape, so it has like a ball milling cut that goes all the way around. So that is a very cool look, and it really plays with the proportions of this, so I like that touch as well. This bezel is full polish, which, as we'll see, complements the case itself nicely. The bezel also does integrate, I think, perfectly with the crystal. Not only do you get that subtle distortion from the crystal, but it really just kind of rolls and merges into that, and I think that's well done. As far as the case, this is coming with 316L stainless steel, and that's true whether you're looking at the bracelet or, of course, on the strap, just looking at the case and the bezel. The primary finishing on the actual mid case is going to be horizontal brushing, as you can see running the length of the case. However, as I already alluded to, you do have a polished sandwich that comes in through the case back as well as through the bezel. And then with having that concavity and that overhang for it, it just gives a really neat visual look to it. I like that a lot. Additionally, you might have noticed the mid case itself is pretty thin. There really is not too much presence to this, but in a good way. It is not the thinnest in the world, however, I think they really played with not only the ball cuts and the differing finishes, but the actual thinness of the mid case itself, I think gives it an overall thinner look and feel than the watch might otherwise have. As far as the lugs, you can see these have, first off, a downturn to them, but they additionally have a real neat curvature and flow. And one of the things that's true with that is that does actually carry, so where the case is just brushed, that carries over and integrates with your polishing, so that ties in with the bezel and the case back, but that actually carries all the way around. A lot of times we'll see the top of the lugs cut with the polishing. This actually wraps around, which gives a nice flow to that as well. In between the lugs, you can see that this is just a straight, or rather is just a traditional curvature to that. And you can see this strap, giving you a heads up there, does actually have some curvature to that. So it looks almost fitted. And then on the crown side, you can see there is no crown guard on this. As far as the crown itself, it is coming in at 6.3 millimeters. It is a basic push-pull construction, as you'd expect both for the water resistance and the style. The crown styling, I would describe as being somewhat of like an onion that does have a coin edge to that. As you can see, just traditional coin edge for it, but it does have somewhat of that onion kind of shape, of course, just lopped off with the end there. This is going to be signed on your exterior, and I think that's very well incorporated there, and I actually like their logo. I think their logo is pretty slick. And then one of the things that's important to note here is this, despite not being a manual wind, it actually is very easy to adjust. I really appreciate, you can see how pronounced of an undercut they did for this, to where they actually cut this off on the underside. So I don't think it looks unfinished or unrefined as far as like a crown stem sticking out, but it makes it very easy to grip a hold of and to get your fingernail under. So I really appreciate that touch from a functional standpoint, and I think it aesthetically looks nice as well. Shifting over to the case back, this is one of the areas that you might not necessarily be that excited to see ordinarily, but this is one you're going to want to check out. The case back on this is held in with screws. As I alluded to earlier, this actually mirrors the front, so your bezel as well. So this is also concave, and this also has polishing, which that gives just such a nice symmetry overall. But where this really starts to shine, once you move in from that polishing and from that concavity, you can check out the text there. Once you get to that exhibition window, you can see this rotor. This thing is insanely good. At the price point that we'll talk about here shortly, this is incredible. It is a one-piece all the way around rotor. It is, of course, thicker down at the bottom, where you need to be able to have the additional weight so it actually functions as a rotor. But it's going to have Geneva striping. It is full milled with their logo in there. It looks incredible. I can't believe how good this is at the price point. Really can't speak highly enough of that. It does also, for the brand name, at the 6 o'clock position when it's upright, does have the Selten name, and that is with a gilt accent, which kind of ties in with the movement with its Geneva striping and gilt accent there as well. Shifting over to the bracelet and strap. First, for the bracelet, this is coming tapered with a 20 millimeters at the lug down to 16 millimeters at the clasp. Just like we saw on their Series 00, this features a fitted female end link. So the end link, their first link rather, or end link is fitted, and then it does have for your first coupler link, that is a female integration. It is once again going to carry through with an H-link construction. It's primarily going to be brushing, though it does have a generous application of polishing with those center links as well. As far as retention, this is held in with pins and collars, so do be aware of that. It's not the hardest in the world to adjust, however, pins and collars are always a bit of a chore. I do have a toolkit linked down in the description if you need to pick one up. It's not that bad to do, and the nice thing about them is once you have adjusted a pin and collar setup, you don't have to worry about them backing out or Loctite or anything like that. So once you get it fitted to you, it's kind of error-proof after that, and you're good to go. The back of this on the bracelet does feature quick release spring bars, so it does make it easy between the 20 millimeter sizing as well as the QR bars that you can change that around without a problem. As far as the articulation, this has reasonably short H-links, and with having the aggressive taper that it does as well as the shorter links, overall, I think the articulation is fantastic on this. It drapes really nicely. It will fold pretty much flat to the case back. However, the QR bars, as always, do block that a bit. So the overall, though, I can't really complain about the articulation. Very comfortable bracelet. Again, as I mentioned, this is true of the Series 00 as well, and I had no complaints there either as far as overall fitment. As far as the clasp, this does feature a butterfly clasp, which I know some of you are groaning, and we'll come back to that. However, this is a nicely done butterfly clasp. It does have some machine turning for the actual clasp mechanism itself. It folds over. It actually has, it is directional for this. You have to do the one side and then the other because they do have that integration, which I think seamlessly merges between those sides, and it does feature their logo on that as well. As far as the strap for this is going to be a leather strap. It is made by Has No Bounds, and it's branded on the back, and it says for Selten. The straps are, I believe, all going to be black, and they do have black stitching as well. So it's a fairly subdued, but it is a nice looking strap. One of the things that I've noticed is this is very light and very pliable. I don't think it feels light as in cheap, but it does make it where it's very comfortable, drapes very nicely and easily around the wrist there. On the interior, this does feature a kind of contrast lining, so this has brown lining on this black strap, and this does also feature a QR bar on the back. So again, no matter which one you have it on, it's easy to change that around. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, you should have a much better feel for these watches. But let's go ahead and bring in some comps before we wrap things up. As I already mentioned earlier, we'll bring in some substitutes so you can get ideas here. This is the Selten Series 00. As you can see, it has a similar layout as far as the 6 o'clock position with the Moonphase on this, whereas this had a day-night indicator down at the bottom there, and that was a cool meteorite touch and incorporation. But this just gives you an idea as far as what this might look like with the meteorite. Next up, just bring in another Selten. Here is their salvage bronze. As you can see, very different look. This is a patina dial, but I wanted to bring this in not only because it gives you an idea as far as sizing, but this is just such a cool aesthetic to this with the patina dials. They're doing a lot of really cool things on the dial front. And then to give you an idea as a stand-in for the aventurine, you can see here it is next to a Zelos Nova. This is the first Nova. And this just gives you an idea of sizing in comparison between this 38.5 versus I believe this one's 38 or 37 offhand here. But that gives you an idea there of what that might look like in render for it. All right, so now that we have all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives. I haven't talked about it yet, but the pricing. These things are a huge value. You are going to get these with the 3 standard variants, which is the Mosu Black, the Aventurine, and the Meteorite, none of which are actually standard, but you're going to get those 3 standard options at $599 starting on their Kickstarter. The Mother of Pearl, the 2 variants that you have, those are going to be $699 starting. Those prices, to me, considering the fact that you're getting tantalum, you're getting a custom Moonphase, you're getting exotic dials, you're getting, as we'll see here, excellent finishing and everything else, plus the bracelet and all that stuff, I think you get a heck of a lot for your money. Excellent there. The dials, as I already alluded to, these dials, as well as the materials, are just stellar. That CNC gouache is incredible. The Mosu Black, as I understand, it's not easy to work with this, and this has a very pure application, looks very clean, really like that. Across the board, they're just fantastic. You can't go wrong with any of them, depending on your particular style. The finishing, considering the fact that these are just prototypes, the finishing's pretty excellent. I really haven't seen much of anything to note as far as finishing quirks or issues, and even the way that these came packaged. That bracelet was impeccably packaged. One of the only times I've received one that didn't have scratches already on the first link, because they had so much extra protection on that. So just really good there. If you saw me fumbling in the unboxing, you know what I'm talking about there. And then sizing, I think this is a pretty versatile sizing. I think this will work for most people. You saw it here on my 6.5-inch wrist, but I think it has plenty of presence for larger wrist. And for smaller wrist, I think you can get away with the compact lug to lug and all those kind of things. I think you're going to be fine even smaller than my wrist. So I think it's going to be pretty versatile. But what about some of the critiques? The first is, while it is such a cool feature to have the tantalum, I will say it doesn't wow me as much as I had hoped as far as the overall pop for the tantalum look. With being set down in the dial, with the light hitting and everything, yes, it gets some blue, it gets some cool effects, but it's in a lot of lighting, it can almost just look like kind of stainless steel or what have you. So it can render a little bit flat, so still really cool, and I appreciate the material, but it doesn't have as much pop as I had hoped. Additionally, the blackness. Some of you might be wondering, and have probably already noticed, especially on this Mosu Black version, you can see because this dial material is so unbelievably black, this actually makes the moon, because that is not Mosu Black, it makes it look a little bit charcoaly. You'll notice on the Mother of Pearl, it's not as dramatic. However, on this, it really makes this look more like a gray than it does actually the black. I personally think that I would have liked had they done a Mosu Black. However, I understand that they were, because this is set down in, you would have still had shadowing and some other things with it. So they made the aesthetic choice to refrain from that, as well as I'm sure it was a cost-saving piece as well, but I can't fault them there. And then this cycle. The styling with this, depending on where you're at as far as the Moonphase cycle, do be aware. This style, as opposed to some others that we've looked at like the Lorsum, they're going to be a little more limited as to how well they can render the look and aesthetic of the moon. That's just the nature of when you do these standard round cutouts. They did a really good job. As you can see, it gets a nice crescent shape and everything to it, but do be aware. It's not going to look 100% picture perfect like you could get from the Lorsum and others that have that kind of dual side design there with a larger window. And then finally, I already mentioned this, but the butterfly clasp, I know a lot of people are going to groan about that because the sizing and adjustability certainly is going to be limited. I've never had that much of an issue, especially on lighter watches like this. However, it's something to be aware of. So where does that leave us overall? I already largely indicated this, but I think you get so much watch for your money. Between the material choices, the overall finishing, the custom touches as far as the module, across the board, I think you're getting a heck of a lot for your money. So personally, if you are in the market for a Moonphase, I definitely think this one deserves consideration. Certainly, it is a very different stylistic than something like the Lorsum, and I love that Lorsum one as well. So I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to be the preference for everybody, but they've really got a nice lineup across the board, and I don't think you can go wrong if this style speaks to you. So with that being said, if you did like this, as always, tap that like button. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. But most importantly, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like either of these? Do you like the design? What's your favorite style for the dial? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.